What is going on, guys? Jesse here. So I've been using this 48-inch OLED monitor from LG as my main computer monitor at my setup for about the past 6 months. And when I first got this monitor, my thought process went a little something like more monitor equals more better. So I just went out and found the biggest monitor I could find. But after using it for the past 6 months, my relationship with it has gotten a little bit complicated because there's a lot of things that I really like about this monitor, but also a lot of things that I'm not so crazy about. And a lot of those things I don't think I really noticed until I used it for a longer period of time. So as promised, here's my 6-month update of using a 48-inch monitor as my main screen. So I think the benefits of having so much screen real estate are pretty self-evident. A bigger screen means more space for having multiple windows open for multitasking, a bigger and more immersive experience for movie and games, and of course just flexing on everybody who comes to see your setup. Like the first thing that everybody says when they first see my desk setup is, dude, why do you have a TV on your desk? And over the past 6 months of using this monitor, I really have been enjoying those benefits. Like on a smaller screen size, every time I have to go split screen, it feels like much more of a compromise. Like I want to see the contents of both windows fully, but they just both get so small to the point that it feels a little bit claustrophobic. Definitely not the case with this though. With the 48-inch, I can basically get 2 windows side by side that are both the size of full screens. And if I'm feeling really crazy, I can even do 4 screens at the same time without any of them feeling too small. And to be fair, you can achieve the same thing by just getting 2 or 4 monitors, but then at that point you're dealing with 4 stands, 4 power cables, 4 HDMI cables, and it just adds up really quickly. And on top of that, you wouldn't be able to use all 4 of those screens as just one really big screen, which this allows you to have that flexibility of having the split screen or just one huge immersive experience. And I gotta say that even after 6 months of using this on a daily basis, that novelty of having such a huge screen on your desk hasn't really worn off yet. One of the things that particularly stood out to me as being a really good experience on this monitor though was video editing. So if you weren't aware, video editing softwares pretty much all have multiple panels on the screen to let you control different things like the timeline, color grading, effects and titles and all that different kind of stuff. And while it is really great and really important to have all of those tools available to you at all times, on a smaller screen, each of those panels just gets so small to the point that, again, everything feels a little bit claustrophobic. But with something like this 48-inch monitor, you get all the space you could ever want with room to spare for every panel. And I genuinely feel like when working on this monitor for video editing, I work a little faster and more efficiently. It isn't all great though. I have noticed some issues with using such a large screen as your computer monitor. Firstly, from a form factor perspective, and I know this is going to sound really obvious, but it's huge and you really need to make sure that you have a big enough desk to accommodate it. And I don't just mean like have a big enough desk so that the legs fit on there. I mean, you have to make sure there's enough depth to the desk that you can get some distance away from it. Which kind of leads me to my second point, which is this monitor is a bit of an ergonomic nightmare. Like unless you have a ridiculously deep desk, sitting this close to such a large screen is really going to cause a lot of eye strain, at least it did for me. And when I first got this monitor, I tried to remedy this by simply getting a keyboard tray, which at first did help a lot because it allowed me to get an extra foot to 1.5 feet away from the screen than I otherwise would have, and it did help. And for the first couple of weeks, I thought this was enough, but over time, I started to notice that I was still getting the same amount of eye strain and headaches that I was before, just to a slightly lesser degree. And the other issue with the keyboard tray was that it made my relative position to the monitor a little bit lower than it otherwise would have been, which was a problem because the monitor is already a little bit bit too tall. So traditionally speaking, you're supposed to have your monitor height set so that your eye level is at or slightly above the top of your monitor. And that's to stop you from needing to crane your neck up to see any part of the monitor. But with a monitor this big, you can just kind of forget it, because even with the monitor basically resting on the desk surface, it's still too tall for most normal heighted people. And after using this monitor for extended periods of time, I genuinely did start to feel my neck hurt a little bit more than it usually would. And this is one of those things that I definitely noticed when I first got this monitor, but I also thought it would be one of those things that I could just get used to over time. But personally for me, over the past 6 months, it just hasn't really gotten a lot better, and it still bothers me. And the other issue with the monitor being this tall is webcams. So I know with a lot of our jobs nowadays, we need webcams, and when your monitor is this tall, placing your webcam on top of the monitor where you usually would is just a little bit too tall, which means anybody conferencing with you is going to get a whole lot of forehead and hair. And alternatively, I guess you could put the webcam on the bottom, but then it's going to be looking up your nose, which is also not ideal. Also, usually I like to have some sort of desk shelf in all of my desk setups because they just offer a lot of utility and they look really nice. But when your monitor is already too tall, you don't want to exacerbate that by again just adding something below it. So yeah, it's too tall for me, but because it's so large, it's also kind of too short at the same time. Like if you have to look at the bottom of the monitor, it's basically on the surface of the desk, which kind of makes me have to tilt my head down to look at it, which is not the best. So yeah, ergonomically, I'm personally just not really a fan of this monitor. And I think this is one of those things that if you use this for a short period of time, you're not going to notice it. But over time, if you use this monitor more and more, you're going to notice that, these discomforts start to show up. And lastly, even though I think multitasking is definitely a strong suit of such a large monitor, I think when you take into account the other options on the market, this becomes a little bit less competitive. Like before I had this monitor, I had a 32:9 aspect ratio super ultra wide monitor, which just made multitasking feel a lot more natural. Like if you split that monitor in half, you basically have two 27-inch monitors side by side, and you can make them function as such. But with this, you get two kind of weird vertical spaces, which aren't really all that useful for much of anything. Like most web pages and apps are all meant for 16:9 or 16:10, and with this in split screen you just don't really get that. Now to be fair, you can split this into 4 16:9 sections, but personally I don't think I've ever needed 4 windows open at the same time. So if I'm just multitasking with 2 open windows, I would much rather have the 2 normal sized windows on the 32:9 aspect ratio monitor. So I guess at this point you can probably guess where this is going. I will be switching back to my 32:9 super ultra wide. And the main reason is mostly just the ergonomic issues that I mentioned before. Like I spend a lot of time at my desk, like probably a lot of you do, and personally I just really want to take care of my body and make sure that I'm not doing anything to actively harm it. And I actually found that after using this 48-inch monitor for a couple of months, I just didn't really look forward to coming to my desk anymore because of all the discomfort that it would cause. And I think that just really defeats the purpose of having a really dope desk setup that you love coming to. And for me and my workflow, I really value multitasking, particularly with 2 windows, and for that the 32:9 works a lot better for what I do. I think I will be keeping this monitor around for a secondary setup that's more dedicated to gaming, because I really do think that this offers a great experience for that. But as far as my main work setup, I'm going to be switching back to the 32:9 super ultra wide. And look, this is just my experience with my workflow. I had a ton of people comment on the last video I made about this that they switched to a 48-inch monitor and they love it. In fact, they want to go even bigger, but I am just sadly not one of those people. So I would still encourage you to go check out a large format monitor like this if you're interested, because there really are a lot of great things about using it. And who knows, maybe it could be exactly what you're looking for. And if that's you, that's awesome. But sadly, that's not me. But that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.